So today's video is a little different than usual because unfortunately I got in a fight with a table saw. Someday, when I'm a little bit less traumatized, I'll tell you all about it, but in the meantime, I'm reminiscing about my top 5 furniture makeovers of all time. You know, projects that didn't try to cut my hand off. My favorite thing about this project was how easy it was. Can you spray paint? Can you use a staple gun? Those two things and an hour or two are really all you need, which is great because quick and easy DIY projects are always the goal on this channel. I started by removing the seat of the chair basically because I could, and it made it a little bit easier to spray paint. Then I spray painted the wicker. I didn't use primer or anything, but you definitely could if you wanted to. For my chairs though, they were $10 and I could always put another coat of paint on later, so I didn't really see the point. While the paint was drying, I wrapped the seat with some outdoor fabric and secured it with a staple gun. Honestly, I probably could have used drop cloths to save a buck or two, but I was trying to be official and therefore splurged for the outdoor fabric. I always overthink the corners, but honestly, you don't really need to do that because it typically turns out fine. The back was the trickiest part, and I had to rip off the fabric in order to get a decent template for the new stuff. Once I had that cut, I secured it in place with the staple gun. Now, unfortunately, those staples have to be covered up somehow, which means I had to recover the piping too. You can always buy new piping or use piping that was already colored, but I'm cheap, so I wanted to use what was already there. I cut a strip of fabric that was the length of the piping and wrapped it around the piping. Then I pinned it in place and glued with fabric glue. I'm sure there's a fancy way to do this with a sewing machine, but I'm just not that good at sewing, so my little fabric glue improv was going to have to do. To secure the piping to the chair, I used a hot glue gun. Fabric glue simply isn't bulky enough to do the job in this kind of setting, and I couldn't think of anything else that would be better. If you have an idea that might work well, go ahead and tell me about it in the comments below. They sat on my porch for a couple of years before I moved away. I didn't bother moving them since I only paid about $10 for each, but I really did love how the makeover turned out. If you want more info on the project, click up at the top to see the full video. Okay, so full disclosure, simple and easy isn't really a phrase that could describe this project. It was one of those plans that seemed easy in my head, but was actually a giant pain in the butt once I actually did it. The general idea was to grab an old dresser and turn the 3 drawers on each side into one big drawer that acts like a hamper. There were a bunch of steps though, and I don't think I realized how long each one would take. First, I had to clear out the drawer mechanisms from the inside of the dresser. Then I had to make new drawers from the drawers I already had. FYI, that took forever. I think I spent a full day on each drawer, which included building the mechanical part of the drawer, as well as making the front look pretty. Then I had to put new slides in so that the new drawers actually worked, and then finally I had to refinish the piece, which anyone who's ever refinished furniture knows is a whole project on its own. After all of that though, I really love the hamper, which is why it makes it on this list. If you want to see the nitty-gritty, be sure to check out the full video linked at the top. I grabbed this pair of nightstands at a garage sale for $15 each. They were Ethan Allen, which my mom was excited about, but I'm not really a brand snob, so... They would have been an easy project if I had made a plan at the beginning and run with it. But no, I was all wishy-washy about it, and so I stripped the nightstand, didn't like it, repainted the nightstand, and finally settled with what was left. At first, all that drama made me really ambivalent about them, but with time, they grew on me, and now I love them. I used Citri Strip to strip the paint or finish, depending on the nightstand. Now, if you feel the need to roll your eyes right now because Citri Strip has never worked for you, I hear you. There's a secret that no one ever talks about. You need to cover this stuff with plastic wrap for a solid 30 minutes before you try and scrape off the goop. Otherwise, it just dries and creates a sticky mess on your piece. Once it's sat for a while, you can scrape the goop off with a plastic putty knife and scrub any remains off with mineral spirits and a Scotch-Brite pad. I did that, then I sanded the top and drawer fronts down to bare wood and restained them with a dark walnut stain. For the rest of the piece, I painted with a mixture of white chalk paint and beige latex paint, because I am all about not having to buy new paint. Finally, I finished the whole thing with Miss Mustard Seed's white antiquing wax. Now, this stuff is expensive, and I don't think I'd recommend it for the price it's actually sold for. I found it at my local Habitat for Humanity restore for $5, and that was exactly what I'd want to pay for it. I should also mention that wax makes a pretty poor finish on top of bare wood. It's not really protective at all. So if your furniture will be getting any sort of regular use, do as I say, not as I do, and finish your piece with something stronger. 2 years later, I absolutely love these nightstands, and I think that the drama was totally worth it. If you think so too, be sure to check out the videos linked above to see the full process. All of the doors in my old house were exactly the same. Brown with a flat panel in the middle and weirdly sticky for reasons I never quite figured out. While most of the doors stayed this way, I decided to make the closet door in my bedroom at least a little more interesting. This is one of my favorite projects of all time because it made a huge difference in the room and it was so utterly simple. I started by priming the door with Zinsser's oil-based bonding primer. Since my doors were sticky and I wasn't quite sure what the top coat was, for me this was an important step. You might be able to get away with a water-based primer if you're painting a more typical door. Then I painted the frame and the center panel different colors. The frame was Benjamin Moore's Gentleman's Gray, and the center was an undetermined cream color. Finally, I cut some pieces of molding to give a French door look to the center of the door. I painted the molding the same blue that was the frame, then glued it into place with wood glue, holding everything down with some textbooks. Once the glue was dry, I took the textbooks off and rehung the door. I'm still a little obsessed with how easy this project was and what a big difference it made. If you are too, be sure to hit the like button and check out the full video linked at the top. My aunt found this awesome cedar chest at a garage sale and gave it to me for my birthday. Obviously, it needed a little bit of work, but it was really easy to restore, and the end result was definitely worth the small time commitment to fixing it up. Stripping the whole thing seemed like a lot of extra work, so instead of removing the finish like I might have otherwise, I simply sanded it down a bit. Then I applied 2 coats of gel stain to the piece with a rag. Gel stain is really convenient in that it can be applied on top of other finishes, which made it perfect for this project. I allowed the gel stain to dry for 24 hours, then I finished the piece with 2 coats of Zinsser's shellac seal coat. In the meantime, I worked on the top. The original bench top was torn in a couple places, so I decided to just reupholster it. I pulled out the piping and wrapped drop cloth around the top, securing it in place on the bottom of the top with a staple gun. Then I created tufts in the top by stabbing a hole with an awl through the fabric and the foam, and adding a screw to pull the foam down a bit. Finally, once all the tufts were in place, I made some buttons with a button-making kit I found at Joann's and hot glued them on. The chest sits under a window in my new house, and I think it looks so cute. If you think you might do a similar project, be sure to check out the full video. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.